This is where the fun begins.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel and to this month's second interview with Talking EU. And I'm happy to have Caffeinated, well, it says Caffeinated Revan, but Caffeinated Wolfe here.
I threw you for a loop there.
I took a look. I'm like, wait a minute, this is Revan. And then hello, Stig, and I have Stig on here, my co-host for Coffee Chat, and he knows a lot about the games and stuff, and so I know that Andrew has played, the game KOTOR, and is savvy with some of the games. I'm not as much, so I brought in my co-host to co-pilot with this interview. So thank you so much for coming on, Stig.
Well, I told you a year ago to play those games. You didn't listen. And now it bit you in the ass.
Oh, whatever. I was finishing up my degree, so there. All right, so let's see what we have in the chat. So we have Grandmaster Chris. Hello. And then Mary Mayhem. Hello. One of my channel members as well. And I am reaching out to her for interview for November. So you guys stay tuned for that. So that should be an awesome interview as well. You don't have to be a super, super big, super fan of the EU to be interviewed for Talking EU.
Yes, you do.
No, this is not your And then Terminus, thank you for coming in, and hail to all. Snail Messiah. Okay, so I'm not the first, but damn, I am awesome. Well, look at you. You and your slow-paced awesomeness. Thank you for slithering on.
He's from Denmark.
Is he?
Yeah, he's a proper Scandinavian. He's not a damn Swede. He's Danish. And the Danes and the Norwegians stay well.
And then I have Miss Sarcastic Nerd in here. I love you, girl. I'm glad you're here. Raises pom-poms in preparation. Woo! All right. And thank you for coming in and being a cheerleader for us and for Andrew in this interview. And then Miss Martin Muse is another channel member. Thank you for coming on in and supporting the channel. And then my fractured butthole.
That's the name of a South Park video game.
What an ass.
Right. I just love everybody and their humor and stuff. It just makes this world amazing, right? And so he says, the butthole says, hail all.
Oh boy.
And then David Woosa, and then GB Luke. I had him the beginning of the week on Tuesday for Talking EU, and that was such a great conversation. So you guys, after you're done here, you can go visit that interview and check out his experience with Star Wars.
Yeah, probably. Awesome. He probably knows more EU than I do, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to remember a lot more details than I do.
Yeah. It's amazing what we remember, like each one of us. And I've going through these interviews, individual interviews, has taught me a lot because I get to see the characters and the story in someone else's perspective. And so I get a new perspective myself. So yeah, it's like, even with you, Andrew, once we get into this interview, there's going to be some points I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't think about it that way. Or wow, okay, that's a awesome, or way to look at that. Or, so I think that these interviews with, Star Wars fans, EU fans, I think they're very significant because then they can open up our minds and eyes into a broader world of Star Wars. So that's how I see that.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to look at it too. Anytime, even the most knowledgeable of people on a given thing, whether it's in your guys' case, Star Wars, or if it's somebody that's super knowledgeable in DC or Marvel Comics, whatever it is, it's always good to have conversations with other people that are either on kind of the same level in terms of knowledge. They're still going to have been reading or watching or playing that content through their own lens, their own eyes, right? So they're going to have a different perspective. You probably agree on some things, and there are going to be other things. Well, I saw this way, and that can lead you to think about things differently, and that's always a really cool thing.
Right, correct. And then so we have Orange Hat Review, another channel member. Thank you for coming in and supporting the channel. And one more thing before I go on and just say hello to the chat is that starting November through January, I am having another campaign to give away a copy of a painting, and it is this one right here. This one is titled Son of Kifu. So my I could say my portfolio that I'm doing on Star Wars is basically the characters and their planet of origin or their home planets. And so the first one I did the campaign was Mistress of Ratatak, and that was Asajj Ventress with her planet Rakata behind her. Not Rakata, Ratatak. And
what?
So that was what?
You should have one with Leia and just have gravel behind her.
Oh Lord.
Oh my Lord.
Why? Because of the
Alderaan blew up.
Well, no, she was still a part of it before it blew up. So I would just do Alderaan behind her, not the explosion. That's sad, Steve. That's really
said, like,
That's depressing.
Pile of gravel behind Leia.
Oh. So we can grovel over Leia.
Yeah.
Look at you.
He just kind of wears off on me.
Clearly, you spend a lot of time around Steve.
Right.
She rock blocked me.
Oh.
There we go. And I'm happy I did. All right, so let's see who is coming in. And then it's the Sentinel. Hello. How are you doing? And then Zagorot. Welcome. And let's see. We're getting some movement going on. And Matt G, $2. Hail, Andrew.
What's up, Matt?
All right. And then the Sentinel. Oh my. Yeah. So thank you guys for coming in. I know we're kind of like, for me, it's like the early evening. For Stig, you're what? Morning or early morning?
You're
9 hours ahead.
1 a.m. and I'm full of painkillers.
Nice.
Okay.
That
All
sounds
right.
fun. Yeah, that's right. You just had like an operation or something like that.
Oh yeah, Great fun.
Sounded like a blast.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah,
Now I know how
that's all he's gonna say.
The enthusiasm is palpable.
Yep.
All right, so let's get into this interview here. So, Andrew, what was the movie, or even maybe the game or book or whatever, that got you into Star Wars?
So, my introduction to Star Wars was, I think, it was. I saw Phantom Menace in theaters with my dad, and it was like the first week or second week that it was in theaters. That was my introduction to Star Wars. And then shortly thereafter, all three of the original trilogy films were playing on TV. And so I watched those. So I started with the movies. But then there was this huge gap in time in between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones and so forth. And so to supplement that, a big part of Star Wars for me growing up was the old light novels, Jedi Apprentice, that followed Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan when he was like really young. We're talking teenage and preteen Obi-Wan. And I grew up with those more than anything. I read a couple of comics, not a ton, but it was primarily those light novels. And those endeared me. If I didn't already love Obi-Wan the most of the film characters just from Phantom Menace alone, like those light novels solidified that pretty strongly because it shows you so much more of an arc. The prequel trilogy does this really good job of showing Obi-Wan as kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, the quote unquote perfect or ideal Jedi, which is what a lot of people think of him as, this unwavering, stalwart man that is firmly planted in the light side of the Force.
Thank you.
Strong conviction. You're very welcome.
Can someone clip that?
However, when you read those novels, you see that there's so much more to him than just that. Yes, that in and of itself is great. But when you read those novels and you really see how he got to that point, there's so much more of an arc to his character, and it made me love the character all the more. He's, as far as I'm concerned, he's the main character of the prequel trilogy. He's the star.
Yeah, Yeah, and then so you got into, for me, I got into to Star Wars, to the OT. You are coming in from the PT era, and I think it kind of shows a little bit because then you go back into time from there, and because of your curiosity to how the Order probably fell, what were the Jedi up to, how did they come up to the situation as well.
I have a weird starting point.
What's yours?
Star Wars Marvel comic number 75.
And I do plan on having an interview with you one-on-one, because we know you have a lot of knowledge and stuff, but just to sit down and you break down Star Wars through your lens is going to be fun. Yeah, so I have yet to put Stieg on in the hot
seat. Probably do it as the final interview of all of them, so you get the correct one at the end.
Save the best for last. Was that? Yeah. Put him in the chair of cheer.
Yeah,
you already put his pride up there already by how you talked about Kenobi.
Kenobi is top 3 all-time characters for me. Favorite in terms of the films and the Skywalker era, bar none. Like, nobody else even comes close. I love Han Solo. There are a lot of the characters I like, but Obi-Wan's like in a completely different tier when it comes to that era of Star Wars.
Right. So with the OT, which movie is your favorite and why?
My favorite, and most people that are old school Star Wars fans, I find, tend to agree with this. It's Empire. Empire is my favorite of the OT. I believe it's, from a film perspective, also the best, which is weird to have the middle kind of part of a trilogy be the best. That does not happen like at all, ever, for the most part.
Because it was the most favored, that it strengthened the trilogy for the OT era, or the OT?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment to make. It just the first film, Star Wars, or now A New Hope, that introduced us to all of these characters, but Empire is where you really see them struggle. That's where you see them outright fail. And that's where the meat is. That's where it's like, okay, we got to meet these characters. We shook hands. We said hi. But in the Empire Strikes Back, that's where we see who they really are. And that's because characters show who they truly are when you see how they react to difficulties, to struggle, to turmoil, and to failure. Luke fails in Empire. A lot of things happen, and not in the good way. A lot of things go wrong in Empire. And that's where we get the big spoiler alert, Vader was Anakin Skywalker and all of that. That's an iconic moment in just film in general. Everything about that film is fantastic. And I love the entire original trilogy, but Empire is a cut above. I will say my favorite Star Wars movie, just subjectively, is Phantom Menace, but there's nostalgia there, there's emotion there, because that was my first Star Wars movie. That was the first one I got to see in theaters with my dad. There are things tied to that make it personally my favorite. But if I had to just objectively say the best Star Wars film out of the 6, it's Empire.
Yeah,
I have a little bit of trivia for that, because I just read the I read the novelizations of the OT.
I didn't know there were novelizations of the OT.
They're skippable. It's pretty much just the movies on the page, but there's some extra stuff and changes in the first and the third one. But in Empire Strikes Back, it was almost no changes whatsoever.
Well, how do you change perfect?
Yeah, which means they haven't, because the novels are based on the first bit of the script before they start changing stuff during shooting. And there was almost no changing. You had the book didn't have the I love you, I know thing, because that was Irvin Kershner who had it. But other than that, there was just some extra, quite a bit of extra Yoda and Luke training. And General Veers died because Hobby flew his speeder kamikaze into the Walker.
Oh wow!
And the guy who finds Han and Luke in the speeder when they've spent the night outside. Zev, I think he's called. He dies. That's it. Other than that, it's
well, that tells me, as someone who is somewhat familiar with production when it comes to movies and TV, that means they didn't really change anything on the script throughout the entire time of production. They said, "Yeah, this is good."
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you already revealed that, the Phantom Menace is your favorite out of the prequel trilogy. So and then I know you gave a little bit of perspective on it, but just go ahead and expand on a little bit more. So what to you makes it the most favorite for you? And you're like the third I had talked to this week that says the Phantom Menace is their favorite movie out of the PT. So go ahead and expand on it a little bit more, Andrew.
So it's a lot of things. It's visually. I loved all the locations that they had. They did some really cool stuff. Like, say what you want about Jar Jar, but Gungan City was really freaking cool visually. Like, just the idea and concept behind this kind of bubbled, shielded city underneath the water. That was really freaking cool. I love the planet of Naboo. I love how green and lush it looks. I love Theed Palace, the aesthetics, the architecture. It's so awesome to look at. I love a lot of the ships in that movie are some of my favorites. I love the Naboo starfighters. Those are some of my favorites still, of like the single one-man ships in Star Wars. My favorite, though, being Obi-Wan's Jedi Starfighter in Attack of the Clones. I love that ship.
The Phantom Menace has one major plot hole. Sorry, I'm going to ruin something for you. When they travel through the planet core?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? They're basically traveling through the ocean, through the planet. And then they exit in the river next to the palace, which is on the mountaintop. There's no ocean inside mountains, are there?
No, there's not.
They rode a submarine up a mountain.
Well, there you go.
Space magic.
Yeah, it's like I said. Okay, so it's about space wizards and magic, right?
Yeah, they used space magic. That's what they did.
Another thing is that we know that Star Wars is not our reality, so there's a lot of unconventional things like sound in space, which that is canon.
Not a thing.
And worlding. Yeah,
not a thing in our world.
Still, right. But I have to say, though, the Phantom Menace, even if you don't like the movies and you don't like the Gungans or what have you, it's still a rock-solid story from start to finish because it works as a standalone story.
Yeah, it starts as a it's a really strong start to the saga, but it's also, yes, as you said, a very strong standalone story, and it's because it had the right pacing, it had great story beats. Say what you will about the length of the extended pod race scene. Is it a little lengthy? Yeah, I would have preferred a longer fight between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan at the end, but that's fine. That's still my favorite lightsaber duel in all of the Star Wars films. But the pod race, if you've got a good surround sound system and a good TV, I'll tell you what, whether you like it or not, it looks and sounds cool.
The weird thing about the pod race is it's something I noticed like the 10th time I watched it, is that every shot with the pods move from the left side of the screen to the right all the time, which is very weird if you think about it, right? Always from left to right.
Yeah. And it could be just because, they did use little what do you call it? The little action figures and stuff like that. So they did use that for that. So it could be just have been like someone's, choice of how they, use their hands and stuff. So maybe that just by instinct, maybe their hands went left first and right. And that's just how it happened. Who knows? So, but that's a, great catch, Stig. Great catch. I mean,
I never thought about that before.
Yeah. Everybody's going to look at it now and say, oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's always from left to right. It's, weird because if you see other racing movies and stuff, they go from both sides, right?
Yeah,
even in the Cars movies.
I haven't seen any of those.
Quite fun, actually. I recommend them.
And then the Sentinel has a point here, since we're talking about the pod racing right now. You know what I found interesting? People who will complain about the pod race scene, but watch a 4-hour NASCAR race.
Thank you. Look at that. And another left turn.
And another left. And another left.
I have some other information for you, and I think you might like this, Andrew. You know how George actually used a lot of the EU in the prequels? He did. Episode 1 has a lot of stuff.
Well, I was seeing something, not to cut you off, but I was seeing something earlier when I was brushing up on stuff that I'd never noticed before. But apparently, Keeneland Voss is in a scene on Tatooine.
It's not him. They actually
Okay, I was gonna say they tried to make him look like him, that's for sure.
Yeah. And when Anakin talks about the moons of Iago, that's from the Droids cartoon.
Yeah.
And when Qui-Gon mentions, pod racing on Malastare, also from the...
It's in the Plagueis novel.
Yeah, right. It's called a speed racing on Malastare. And that's from the 80s. And then you have Prince Zizor from Shadows of the Empire. He's at the pod race.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's full of stuff like that. Darth Maul's lightsaber, that's from...
well, yeah, the double-bladed lightsaber, that came straight from the EU, beginning with Exar Kun.
Yeah, and Coruscant, the name Coruscant.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. Now they say, oh, well, George never liked the EU, and, there's a lot of that misconception talk. But when you look at the prequel trilogy, all the world building comes from the EU. If he did not like it and he did not want anything to do with it, then he
didn't use it.
Yeah,
I think Gardulla the Hutt and Mos Espa are EU as well.
Right. So, Andrew, we know that the Jedi Apprentice got you into the EU, right? So you already expanded on that as well. So what was your experience with it when you first started reading it?
When I first started reading it, at that point, I had to work off of in terms of knowledge on my, at the time, favorite character, because all I had to work with was the movies. Obi-Wan was Phantom Menace and the original trilogy. So that's all the knowledge I had. And really, he shows up as a Force Ghost a little bit in the latter 2 movies, and then it's mainly that first one, A New Hope. So that's all I had to work with. And so getting to dive deeper into his backstory, into his history, seeing how he grows as a young man, into the man who will eventually train the Chosen One, who will eventually be kind of looked at by so many as, the ideal Jedi, was super cool to do. He goes through so much that people who just see the movies or just read any of the comics that have come out in the last 20 years or whatnot, they have no clue about. No clue at all. When he was a teen, he was seduced by the dark side for a brief period of time. And you think of Obi-Wan and you're like, bullshit. No shit. It happened. And there was a moment where Qui-Gon was not going to take him back as his apprentice because of that. He's like, no, I'm not dealing with that. But Obi-Wan redeemed himself, and Qui-Gon decided to give him a little bit of grace, and the rest is kind of history. He is one of the most well-known Jedi, just period. Even though, yes, he's powerful. It's hard to argue that Obi-Wan isn't powerful. He would have died immediately against Anakin otherwise, but he's not putting him in the same tier as some of these crazy powerful people from the Old Republic era of Star Wars. Because there was this huge there's in video games and in card games and RPGs in general, there's a thing we call power creep, where things just seem to escalate further and further, and it seems like characters just continually get more and more powerful. Well, Star Wars kind of did the opposite of that for a while. After the Old Republic, there's a huge drop in power in terms of how you would scale and look at the power levels of some of these characters in the, we'll say, Plagueis through the Skywalker saga era, and those which came before. like reading the old Republic stuff makes you look at somebody like Palpatine and go, man, you're chump change compared to these guys, because there was this huge, and the Jedi as well, like there's this huge dilution of power that happens, and it's cool to look at these characters that are like uber powerful, like they're on a whole level in and of themselves, like the freaking force bomb, like, okay, yeah, you just wipe out an entire planet, all right, that's not overpowered much, okay, but Obi-Wan is still inarguably a powerful Jedi, especially for his era. If you just take a snapshot, just his era, very powerful. But I think it's his goodness that makes him so likable, and that he does legitimately want to do what's right through the lens of like this order that he has such deep conviction in. And he has that conviction. Some people, I think, that only see the movies could look at that through the eyes of, okay, well, maybe that's a little dogmatic, or maybe he's a little blinded by his, we'll call it faith. But if you look through the Jedi Apprentice novels and you look at his actual history, the arc he goes through, the trials that he goes through, you realize he wasn't just spouting some dogmatic BS. He believes this stuff because he lived through this stuff.
Right.
You know, he has that conviction because he has reason to have it.
Right. He just wasn't made into this OP character that just did everything that, like something like with the MacGuffin that pushed him along, basically. You know, and that's what I like about Obi-Wan, because when you get into, you know, post PT era, when he goes into exile, and we'll get into the Kenobi novel here pretty soon.
Oh, that book was so good.
Right. Yeah. Right. I think everybody that I've talked to has said, like, they just were like, this hands down is the best, especially when it comes to Obi-Wan. But we also know that he basically, when he's given orders, he sticks to those orders. And we see that in that novel. So when we get into that, we'll discuss that a little bit more. So Stig, do you have any other questions you want to ask him about his experience with the EU?
Well, I have a question for both of you, really.
It's not my interview, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, you know, the in the old Republic, and you know, during the Bane era, all that, and even before that, during the Tales of the Jedi, the Jedi and Sith are really powerful, right? But when Episode 1 starts, they're not, you know, because you've had 1,000 years of peace.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have had to learn basically destructive stuff or combat stuff as much as during the Old Republic,
right,
where there's all kinds of Sith. You know, even the Sith are fighting each other and the Republic back then.
Right. Well, yeah, you had the different civil wars. You had, there's the Mandalorian wars. You have with the Sith having the Dark Brotherhood of the Sith, like that diluted the power of the dark side, things like that. Then Bane kind of reconstituted that when, you know, he utilized the rule of two, which he really coined from what Revan's instructions were. Like Revan actually came up with the idea. Bane was the one that put it into action.
Do you know where Bane came from?
In the Apatros?
No, I mean...
his name.
No, yeah, it's
his name is because his dad would call him Bane.
No. But it's from the novelization of the Phantom Menace. Terry Brooks George Lucas wanted to put some Rule of Two stuff into the movie, but he just didn't have time.
Interesting. That I didn't know.
Yeah, so he spoke to Terry Brooks, who's a damn good writer, who was hired to write the Episode 1 novel, and he had a long meeting with George Lucas, and Lucas said, back in the day there were they started the Rule of Two and stuff, so they could.
That's why they had the line "always two there are" at the end.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only thing he put in the actual movie. But Terry Brooks suggested, what about Darth Bane, since he's the Bane of the Jedi? And Lucas was like, yeah, good name.
That's a cool little bit of info.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
I did not know that. I thought you were actually asking me specifically about the character, not like the production
You're like,
side.
oh, this is.
Yeah.
Oh, I know this one. I know this one. I got excited for a second.
You're like,
Well,
woo, all right.
you aced that bit of it though.
Yeah, Stig is like, this is okay. Stig approved there. Stig approved, right? So who is? Well, I know who it is, and it might be obvious here, but who is your favorite EU character and why?
Oh boy. All right. Revan, don't know his actual real name. That's never been revealed, though he did adopt the name Arvin to try and not so cleverly disguise his name. That I don't know why he thought that was a good idea. Anybody with two brain cells to rub together could fit that one. But Darth Revan, or just Revan, I think is one of the most interesting characters in all of Star Wars lore. There are a number of characters that go from light side to dark side, or dark side to light side. One or two that even kind of have jumped back and forth like more than once. But I think Revan is one of the probably two most interesting of those, the other being Kreia. But it was Revan's master, or at least his first one. Revan, there's so much to say about Revan. It's so much more than just him being one of the absolute most badass and powerful characters in Star Wars lore, period, front to back. I don't care which era. He makes so many characters look like a joke if we're just talking power. But if we're talking about story, which is what I care about even more, he goes through so much. He's this prodigy, and you can take characters and you can give them like innate abilities, or like have them have a high ceiling, a high capacity, like in the case of Anakin, the chosen one. Or they could have done that properly with Rey, but they didn't have good writers, so they didn't. So you could take a character, give them a high ceiling that they could reach for. They have a high potential, but you have to put a good story to it. And Revan is one of the most well-crafted characters. If we're looking at like how Revan is canonically, in terms of what his story was, going from being a young prodigy, getting kind of fixated on Kreia, Jedi Master Kreia's ideals about how the Force works and all of this, to him having these strong convictions about stopping some seemingly unstoppable force and going against the Jedi Order's wishes and orders, really, to stay the hell out of the Mandalorian Wars, and him being like, nah, actually going to take people with me, and we're going to stop these guys. And they did. For him to go, and this is obviously an example and a testament to how powerful he was, but for him to, and how skilled he was, for him to face Mandalore the Ultimate in one-on-one combat, like, that's a big freaking deal. People might not realize, people who, watch The Mandalorian might not realize how big of a deal that is. But in Star Wars old lore, the Mandalorians are no joke. They are feared for a damn reason. Jin may have needed his handheld through those 2 seasons of The Mandalorian show. Regular, average Mandalorians wouldn't have needed that kind of help.
What's ironic,
it's pretty ridiculous.
What's that, Steve?
You have people that are cheering for the Mandalorian, and they're bashing the EU as shit. Everything in it was shit. And they're like, the word Mandalorian is EU.
That's straight from the EU. That much I do know.
It's actually all the way from the old Marvel comics, which weren't canon. They were like lower tier canon. From the 80s, because there's one there when they run into Fen Shaisha, I think his name is, and he explains, and this is from 82 or 81, explains how Palpatine rose to power through politics during the Clone Wars and made war against the Mandalorians. I'm like, and George didn't have a plan? Really? That sounds like the prequels.
Yeah, they one of the first things that they did was wipe out the Mandalorians.
Yeah.
Right.
For damn good reason. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't think they were a threat, and a strong threat. And so he did that, and then that's where his story really gets interesting, is after that bit, because him and Malik, all of a sudden, after Mandalore the Ultimate tells Revan, like, this actually wasn't initially my idea, this was kind of put into my head, they go searching, like, what what are you talking about? Right.
Mhm.
And they end up getting seduced and controlled by the dark side, by Emperor Vitiate. And he goes through this huge arc of going from waging his own galactic war on the Jedi, on the Republic, to all of a sudden getting redeemed. The Jedi, as pissed as they probably were at him, they're like, yeah, but he's really powerful. We could probably use a weapon like him in our arsenal. We got nothing that's even close to him. So let's just, I don't know, mind wipe him and use him against Malik, who had betrayed Revan. And but through all of that, even after regaining his memories, or at least most of his memories, he doesn't regain all of them until he dons his mask again, before what I feel is actually a really dumb conclusion to his story. I'll get to that later. I've got a lot of thoughts on Revan.
Yes, and we'll get into that. Yes. So just
where was that? Oh my! I just totally brain farted.
You talked about him adorning his mask again.
Oh yeah. So even after regaining his memories, he still has a strong conviction of protecting people he cares about, and doing the right thing whilst accessing both sides of the Force. He's the same person. He has this strong conviction, and he sacrifices so much of himself personally. He never gets to see his son. He doesn't get to see the most. Well, okay, that's not entirely. He doesn't get to see his son in person. He doesn't get to see Vader like face to face. He sees Bastila holding baby Vader like from a little hologram that Mitra brought him. And even knowing that what he's trying to do when he's going to try and take out the Sith Emperor is going to be possibly the last thing he does, he still does it anyway, because his conviction is, I'm doing this for my family. Right. And that's one of the strongest things you can have in terms of a conviction, in terms of motivation for a character, someone who's willing to do that self-sacrifice, that level of it. And you don't see that out of that many characters, especially nowadays, because nowadays characters don't have to sacrifice anything to win. They just win because they exist, and that's how writing works, apparently.
So Terminus East is I'm gonna read this real quick and then hold your thoughts, Stig. Terminus basically gave a $5 super chat. Thank you so much. And he states, Revan was the Skywalker of his time. It would be cool to see Shmi were related to him. I mean, why did the Force choose her to bear the chosen one? I think it's very
it was actually
that they did
Plagueis.
Her, read
Plagueis, Terminus.
So Plagueis is the one that set it in motion. The Force is the one that brought Anakin to life, basically Anakin. And we'll get into that because I know that's one of the novels you're into right now. And but I think it's very unique for her not to be specifically related to anyone. It makes it more unique.
I don't personally, and this is a personal thing, and it would link into another one of my favorite Star Wars characters. I don't think to have a relatable and a compelling character and a powerful character that it has to be someone that's related to the same bloodline as everybody else. That's name's Joe Blow, and they happen to be uber powerful. Like the EU post OT, so the New Jedi Order era, like it. I know it goes into a lot of other characters as well, but it has this heavy focus on the descendants of Luke and all of that, and that's fine. But I think that there's something to be said of characters that stand on their own. Revan has no mention of his family, no mention of his parents, nothing. We don't even know his own freaking name or the name of the planet that he was born on. We just know that he was born in the Outer Rim. He ends up being incredibly compelling and powerful all on his own without any of that other stuff. You don't need that. You just need to write a compelling character. It doesn't always have to be part of the same bloodline. So I'm not a huge fan of that comparison. I get what he's getting at. I just personally, I don't like things always having to be tied to one family or another for it to make sense that this character is powerful. Bane wasn't related to anybody special, but he was powerful as shit. Oh man, the Bane trilogy is some of just the most well-written, compelling stories I've read, period, not just Star Wars, just period.
Right. And then so we'll go off of that here. So, you know, so we know Revan's your favorite character and everything. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a quiz here for you.
Oh boy.
Can I sneak?
And I don't know if Stig will know this. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Stig. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say it earlier, but question for Andrew though. Did you like how the Knights of the Old Republic comics tied into the game and the novels?
I haven't read the comics yet, actually.
Oh, you're in for a treat.
I actually, they're on my list of things to get and to read. I actually have not read them yet.
Yeah, it's like I never got into comics growing up, and so now I'm like revisiting. So I feel like, you know, a young girl again, getting into Star Wars all over again, because I'm getting a little bit of more details in the history I know. So you're gonna love them.
I know that feeling. Like getting into these EU novels has gotten me excited about Star Wars for the first time in a long time. Basically.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing for everybody to do right now, especially with the state of Star Wars, with the direction they're going. If you don't agree with it and you feel like you keep on getting let down, just go back and visit the novels and stuff, because then there you have the gems that you've been looking for, right? You know, and that's how I see that. And so let's go to the quiz here now. When was Revan born?
3994 BBY.
Woo, you got it.
Oh shit. I'm normally really bad at remembering numbers too.
Yes, 3994 BBY was when he was born. And yeah, so and like he's a phenomenal character during the time. And you're right, we don't need every single character tied to one another. I'd rather not know Shmi Skywalker's origins either. I just like what we got from her, because that makes Anakin a mystery as well, especially since, you know, he was made by the Force to counter Plagueis.
Yeah.
You know, so it just adds to the story. And then it kind of debunks what, you know, Disney Lucasfilm says, that, you know, not everybody should be related to everybody, because that's what they did in Star Wars in the past. That's not true, because Anakin was not related to anybody significant. Neither was Yoda, neither was Obi-Wan. Dooku, or Count Dooku, yes, because he, you know, his family ties and stuff, but it was far in between. It made it believable, because anybody can be a Jedi if they had enough of, I guess you could say, midichlorian or strength in the Force, whichever way you want to go with that.
Yeah.
A little bit of
you just have to have some potential to be able to tap into it.
Right. Okay, Stig?
Dooku is his first name because he's a count, and he always put the nobility title in front of a first name.
Yeah.
You know, like Prince William, you know, Prince Charles, all that stuff. So Dooku, he's Count Dooku of Serrano. He's his first name is Dooku. Right.
And then Abu Nas, thank you so much for the $10 super chat.
What's up, Abu?
Don't mind me, OG Star Wars. I am up here lurking, listening while I'm cooking dinner. I'm still on cloud 9 today. Thank you. He received his copy of the painting that he purchased of.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so Mistress of Rat Attack, and I do have the link pinned if you guys want to purchase a copy. Channel members get 10% discount. So if you're a channel member and you want that discount, go ahead and get a hold of me, and I'll send that to you. And then love salute to Stig, or heart salute to Stig and Wolf. Awesome stream. I'm loving the Darth Revan lore. Awesome.
Abu's a Revan guy like me. He gets it. He gets it.
Right. And so let's move on here. So we already know you're passionate about the Old Republic era. And so my next question goes into that. And so you can expand a little bit more. What do you like most about the Old Republic era?
I think that the Old Republic is so interesting because that's when a lot of sides had the most to lose. This is when the Jedi were at the height of their power. The Sith, in some ways, depending on which snippet of history you're taking it from, were also kind of at the height of their power. If you take, you know, Vitiate, or if you take Revan, you could say Bane, but Bane didn't act on it outside of working in the shadows. You know, he had his whole shadow network of informants and everything. He was doing things behind the scenes, working through politicians and things like that, which is where kind of Palpatine kind of derived those tactics, because those tactics were first initiated and put in place by Bane. Is like, we need to act in the shadows until the time is right. Otherwise, we're just going to get wiped out completely this time. And so I find it interesting when characters have the most to lose and how they react to the things that go on around them. There's so many major stories that happened during that era. You know, you have the Jedi Civil War, you have the Mandalorian Wars, and this is where a lot of my favorite characters also are derived from. Obviously, Revan being among them. Now that I've gone through the Darth Bane trilogy, Bane, even more so than Bane, his apprentice, Zana. Oh my God. Zana is so freaking cool. I'm absolutely depressed and heartbroken that Carpetian wasn't allowed to expand on her more, because I would read a whole freaking trilogy just on Zana. You want to talk about like powerful female characters, light side or dark side? Zana is it. She is so cool. And in any moment that you think, wow, maybe she's slipping. Nope. She's playing 4D chess. And it's just so cool. And it's organic, though, which is what's important. It doesn't feel like this is coming out of nowhere when she's making plays and power plays. It doesn't feel like, oh, how did she get so smart? Or how did she get so powerful? No, you know why she's so powerful and why she's so smart. Freaking Bane trained her and taught her almost everything he knew. Obviously, he held a couple things back because that's what you do. True magician never reveals all of his secrets and all of that.
Right.
But she applied what he taught her and then learned other things on her own in secret, unbeknownst to him, like Sith sorcery, which he had no talent for, that he admits. And she utilizes that. She utilizes her strengths because she does have talent for that. And she's just a compelling and well-written character. And it doesn't matter that, you know, the Bane novels do this really wonderful thing about making you really get behind the Sith characters. Like, I'm a light side guy, no question about it. But man, it's hard to not get behind these characters. And why? Because Drew Karpyshyn is an incredible writer, and he makes the characters relatable. And it's just, it's so well done. So yeah, the Old Republic, it's 1.5 million things, but the settings, the events, and above all, the characters that came out of it. I can't pick any other era to love more.
Okay. Yeah. And I know Stig and I have said this before, but there was going to be a trilogy, Stig, for Darth Zana before the buyout.
A
duology. There we go.
I would have taken even one book on Zana, and I would have been happy. I would have wanted more, probably, but like because there's this huge gap in time. Because I after I finished the Darth Bane trilogy, I jumped into the Plagueis novel, and I'm about a quarter of the way through that right now. Yeah, about a quarter. And there's just this huge gap in galactic history that you're missing in between those in terms of Sith history. Like you learn just a couple of little things, but that's it. And so it's like, I want to know what went down with Zana and her apprentice Cognis. I want to know what happened after that. I want to know what happened with Set Hearth and the holocron that he got away with. Like, I want to know all of this stuff, and we don't get to learn it because, you know, Disney pulled the plug on all the good stuff so that they could put in their fan fiction.
If you're reading Plagueis, make sure to read Darth Maul Shadowhunter and what's the other one, Laura? There's two books that takes place at the same time as Plagueis.
Yeah, Shadowhunter.
They intertwine.
Okay.
Right. Yes, I do.
Is it the? It's not
Cloak
the
of Deception.
Cloak of Deception, yes. Cloak of Deception and Shadowhunter are both. They take place during Plagueis, and they're referenced.
Oh, interesting.
Maul returns from a mission and is injured and stuff. That happens in the book.
I'll say this: Plagueis is held up as like one of the best EU novels, especially those that kind of fall within relative range of the Skywalker saga. The story for it is incredible. It's compelling. Learning more about Palpatine himself is very interesting, and learning how different Plagueis is as a Sith than those that came before him is incredibly interesting. The writing, however, the writing tone, the writing voice is actually really difficult for me to go through. And here's why. It doesn't matter which Star Wars novel I've gone through so far, whether it was the Apprentice novels back when I was younger, whether it was the Kenobi novel, which, God almighty, that was a good book. Whether it was Revan, whether it was, well, anything the Carpathians done, really. They all have a similar tone to where it all feels like it's one world. It feels like you are reading stuff that's happening in the same galaxy, in the same universe. Plagueis, the writing style is so far afield from anything else that I've read. It's almost like I'm reading Tolkien, but it's not Tolkien. And so the writing style feels out of place. I understand why it's written. It's in this kind of pompous, hoity-toity, upper class voice. And I get exactly why, because of Plagueis. It's through his eyes, through his voice, and this is how he acts, this is how he speaks. It's just so not off-putting, but it's almost distracting, because I'm a writer and an editor, and I have I'd say a pretty good vocabulary. And there have been a couple of times where I'm like, wow, he went with that word. People don't use that word in writing. It's to a point where it's like, wow, that's impressive, but simultaneously distracting. There have been several moments in the book, and I'm only a quarter of the way through it so far, where it actually takes me out of the events that are happening, and I just have to step back for a second, like, why was this necessary? Like, you could have toned it down just a teeny bit, just like you're at like a 12, bring it to a 9 and we're good. But the story, I can't argue with how good the story is. It's very, very interesting, very compelling, but the writer's voice just constantly throws me off. He's a great writer, but it's just like, wow, I wasn't expecting, if somebody had given me a heads up, like, hey, this book is not going to read like other Star Wars books that you've gone through. The writing is completely different. The tone, the voice, everything. That might have like braced me a little bit, but I'm like, wow, this is a huge difference. And so it's kind of odd. It's hard for me to like. I started that book over a month ago, and most of the Star Wars novels I've been going through, I get through in a week, and so I've had to take breaks with it because it gets distracting, but I want to get to the end because I want to know everything that happens. So it's kind of actually, while it's been interesting, it's also been a frustrating book for me to get through, and not because I'm some illiterate that doesn't understand big words.
James Lucino is, go ahead, Steve.
That's right. Well, do you think that's the problem, though? The use of big words and stuff, it doesn't fit with Star Wars, because Star Wars is by design simplified, so it has a different tone through the language used in that book, so it doesn't really feel like Star Wars,
right?
I don't know, it's just something I thought about.
And then James Lucino,
he said it sounds more like Tolkien, and it kind of does, which and Tolkien isn't Star Wars,
And then you'll find, like, once you get through the EU and then you start experiencing different authors, there's main authors that write that are, that were maintained because of their success in writing the story and keeping continuity. And James Lucino is one of them. However, of course, you're going to see the different tones and the different writing styles and everything per author. And you're going to end up developing your own favorite author. So, that's going to be a fun discovery for you, Andrew, is finding out who you really like, and authors, the tones. And sometimes you'll even find that, one book from a certain author may not be as good as another one that he's written. And
to that point. What's up?
The guy who wrote the Kenobi novel, which is probably my favorite novel in the EU, he also wrote Shadows of Mindor, I believe.
Yeah.
Which is a shit book.
I like Shadows. I thought it was fun. So, but yeah, John Jackson Miller is another one, and that's a good example because I thought it was fun. It's not the best one, but I thought it was fun. But there are critiques, people like, oh, it's like one of those split review kind of novels. So John Jackson Miller was a success with writing Kenobi, but not as well as with Shadows of Mindor. So you'll see that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
now, seeing Disney lore expand, that's going to expand on the beloved characters like Revan, because we already knew that they brought in Revan by name, etc., into the sequel trilogy, right? Into the Rise of Palpatine. What are your thoughts about that, Andrew, since that's your favorite character? What do you think about them expanding on Revan more and the direction that they possibly will go with it?
The optimist in me wants to say that they're just going to flesh out details that we barely got anything of, or we didn't get before, but fall in line and jive and square with what we already know of the character. The realist in me, in terms of what I've seen through history of precedent for this now with the last several years of Disney handling the property, or mishandling rather, is they're probably going to muck it up. And I'm gonna play the remake because I have to remain intellectually honest, and I won't allow myself to shit on something if I don't first consume it myself and say, oh yeah, this was shit. And then I'll say it's shit. But if I'm going to be objective. If it's one of those things where it's a good game, but they muck up the story, but like all the gameplay hits the right functions, the right mechanics, the right beats, I'll be able to say that, like, okay, they screwed up the story, but from a gameplay perspective, this was fantastic. If it winds up being good on both sides, which is what I would hope and pray for with all of my heart, because I love this story and I love these characters. If it ends up being good, then I'm going to say it's good. And I'll probably catch flack for it because there'll probably be people that disagree with it on one point or another. The likelihood, though, is that it's probably going to get mucked up. And that makes me sad to say because I love these stories.
It's already mucked up, actually. Because KOTOR, right? A lot of it takes place in the Outer Rim. On Tatooine and other planets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in Disney canon, there's no hyperspace lanes out there until the High Republic.
Yeah,
that's the plot of the High Republic. So
that's on them. They screwed that up all on their own.
Exactly.
They don't know their own lore, but Steve, we knew this.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's already a plot hole due to the clowns at the High Republic.
Terminus has a $10 super chat, and I actually would like to respond to it once you're done reading it, Laura.
Okay, so yeah, I was just waiting for Steve to finish up. But Terminus, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Andrew still needs to play KOTOR. It continues and finishes a story from both KOTOR games and Revan novel, and fleshes Vitiate even more as an antagonist. Carpathian even helped with the writing.
So yeah, I might not have played SWTOR. However, I have followed and watched all the stuff that involves Revan in it, and I will say that SWTOR completely fucked up the story of Revan. If you ask me personally, really? I think that they, and I know that Star Wars writers, including Carpathian, were brought in and involved with it because he did the Revan novel, and he's done great work with. He was involved with the games and all of that.
Basically, the creator of Revan in a sense, because he's the one that's not very much. Yeah.
But unfortunately, he's not the end all be all decision maker on the character, and so they wanted to go in a specific direction that would suit an MMO. And I hate that Revan was reduced to essentially an ineffectual nothing and then turn into a bad guy again, just so that they could have some nobody MMO player character be the one to take down Vitiate. I think that was a complete misuse and disrespect to the character. And not that's from a writing perspective. That's not from him just being my favorite character in all of Star Wars. I feel like with MMOs, you have to take certain beats of storytelling with a grain of salt. And that's so ridiculous. Yes, in the KOTOR games, there's give and take because you can kind of choose your own adventure in those games, right? But there's still a canon story within the games. It's like, okay, you can make all these different decisions and go way off course, but we still know and understand and accept that this right here is the actual canon version of it. This is what actually happened in history. I think that finishing off Revan's story in an MMO was one of the worst possible ideas, and I hate how his story ended. It actually made me physically angry.
You want a little spoiler about what's going to happen with Revan in the KOTOR remake? You know how Bastila and Revan has a link?
Well, yeah, they have a force link. They have a force bond. Yeah,
that's going to be a dyad now. I'm calling it right now.
I don't want them bringing that shit in. No,
that's
we're going to get into that later, but just a little bit about that. But oh my god, I'm like cringing about this whole retcon with even the movies. We don't even have to include the EU, but with the movies, with the Rule of Two and even Palpatine. Right, and even with Palpatine's rise as the Emperor, that takes away all the motives, of like even the master with the power and the apprentice to crave it. Yeah, that deal, and it takes away because he wasn't recruiting Anakin and bringing him to the dark side so that they can create a dyad. He was doing that because he knew that Anakin was strong in the Force, right? But he also knew that he could use him as a tool. There's a difference.
Well, he knew that Anakin he had the potential to be powerful enough to beat him. So he's like, well, instead, I'm going to make you my lackey. I'm going to make you my apprentice. And so if you can't beat it, control it, right? And that's exactly what Palpatine's thoughts were. It's far afield from the Rule of Two, even, but that had gone way off course long before Palpatine and Plagueis.
Yeah, and then so like if they really wanted the dyad for like to be something that of a newer Sith kind of I guess you could say Sith alchemy or whatever, then they should have done like what they did in Legacy, because we've seen that the Rule of Two started like waning or disappearing with Palpatine, and then we get 140 years after where we have Legacy comics and they had the one Sith, so they could have used it after, so they could have used it after the ST to develop a new order of the Sith.
Yeah.
And left everything alone that was made before then. But they're not thinking that way. They just want to. They're using it to retcon the movies, and build their own lore off of it. So they're retconning everything. But what? We won't get too much into that. So, with what you have read so far, what is your favorite EU novel?
I want to say Revan, because Revan's my favorite character, but the truth is it's not. And that's because that book was written with the MMO story in mind. And so we like the tail end of that book is like the last couple of chapters in that book actually piss me off. The rest of the book is incredible and I love it. And Drew Karpyshyn is one of my all-time favorite authors, and he's fantastic. It's probably Rule of Two. It's probably that. That book, the entire Bane trilogy was just so fantastic. But that was one of those really, really rare diamonds in the rough of a trilogy where each sequel is better, or at least I enjoy it more than what came before it. And that's just what happened with the Bane trilogy. I loved the first book. I wound up enjoying the second one even more. Wound up enjoying the third one even more because it added more for me to love, more for me to enjoy. I completely was enamored with the character of Bane through the first book. And then they bring in Zana, and now you've given me more to love within this story, within this time frame, within this period of history. And then in the third book, they expand on Zana even more. And I love that Karpyshyn gave proper due to both of the characters. Like, he didn't all of a sudden have Zana take over the whole book and we only get little beats of Bane here and there. No, he gives proper storytelling to both of the characters and balances it so well. He's such a freaking fantastic writer. Anything he's written, I've loved, basically.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we are now discovering like you're a huge fan of his and stuff. Now with Bane's character, just reading about his character and his tragic beginning with his father.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you feel about that? Because we went from, we went about him learning about him working in the mines, how his father verbally abused him, and that kind of set up the tone for him.
And physically. Right.
And so that kind of set up the tone for him to harness the dark side with probably not even knowing it. And then because of that and how it made him feel, then starting to learn and being recruited in. So what did you think about that whole arc of his?
This goes back to something I said earlier, which is crafting relatable and compelling characters. And you have to do that. If you're going to make me give, especially me, I'm a character story guy. I want cool, big events and compelling events that are going on around. But what's more important and more compelling to me is how the characters within those events react to them, how they respond. And Bane has a very human response and reaction to a lot of what he goes through. There, you can see when you read that first novel, especially, you can see when you're given his history and Carpetian layers in little bits of like what he went through with his abusive father. All through that, you can see how he gets from point A to point B. It makes sense. You can connect those dots easily. You don't have to use fuzzy math or put some BS reason for it. You can understand how he went from being this abused worker in the mines. He was probably never going to be able to go anywhere else his entire life. He was going to work, live, sleep, and die on this desolate planet until the end of his days. Like, he was going to die a broken man. But you see how he goes from that potential future to seizing an opportunity, and how the events that shaped him as a young man led him to be willing to fight for the dark side. Initially, it was like, all right, well, this is my out, right? Like his friend at the cantina says, well, this is your best way of getting out of here.
Right.
And so he's like, he'd heard things about the Sith army, right? He'd heard things about the Brotherhood. He knows they're not nice people, but he wants off this rock. And so he takes the opportunity. He seizes that opportunity. And that opens him up to then, okay, I have this other opportunity laid before me. Because when he was working just as a soldier, a foot soldier, you could look at that, and yes, he was fighting for the Sith army, but his actions were that of a good guy, right? You would look to his actions, how he treated his troops, and you're like, that's a proper commander right there. That's someone who gives a damn about the people around him. But you see how he goes through these events in his life, and all of those add up properly. 1 and 1 equals 2 in his story arc. It makes sense how he gets from one point in his life to the next, eventually ending up us realizing, okay, this is the Sithari. This is the guy that is going to bring about a complete reconstitution of the Sith. And you see how he gets there and all of his interactions with the different characters, like him first being just an apprentice and learning little bits here on Korriban, to him all of a sudden realizing these guys are pretenders.
Right.
These guys aren't the real deal. And then him learning the difference between them and the real deal. Like when he picks up Revan's holocron, I would like reading that bit, how he stands and laughs, like he's realizing, like he had thought he had a good idea beforehand, before finding the holocron on, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the planet that he found it on.
What is it? I'm linking to right now.
I know this. It'll come to me. Rakata Prime. It was in a temple there. But so before, he already had a good gut feeling that these guys were clowns. These were pretenders. And
Soul Assassin says Lahan. So I was like, and then everybody's like, Korriban? And then Leon.
No, he finds Yeah, he finds
Ricotta
he finds it on Temple and Ricotta Prime.
Right.
He had a good idea that these guys were clowns and pretenders, but
Right.
he didn't know for sure. But when he picks up Revan's holocron and he starts listening, that's when he knows, and that's when there's this huge paradigm shift within him, and he gets an entirely new life goal and life mission. And you just following him from there through the second and third novels is just so freaking cool. Like he is as convicted as it gets. He is dedicated.
Right. And we see him too, like when he goes into apprenticeship and they have to, you know, square off with each other at certain points and stuff. We see him get beat up. We see we see him cheat too as well. It's like it was like something that that I guess you could say is relatable, because, you know, not everybody succeeds being successful all the time. Sometimes you have to go through failure. Sometimes you have to get beat up and go through trials. And we see that with Luke. But this right here, when you read Darth Bane trilogy, it's almost like the reverse hero's journey, because he's not becoming the hero, he's becoming the villain, but he still goes through the same. He answers a call of something greater for himself, wanting to be removed from his situation, right? And going into something that probably isn't beneficial for him, but because of his lifestyle and how he was treated by his father and stuff, he seems to fit in. You know,
you said it perfect. He kind of goes through the hero's journey, just not as a hero.
Right.
At least in that first book, at the very least.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you see him, he still fails, but then he sees how wrong the Brotherhood of the Sith is, right? And how they're infighting all the time and all this. And so he's like, we need to survive as a Sith culture, right? Because in reality, not everybody's a Sith per species, but it's almost like the Mandalorians. If you're willing to come in and accept, you know, everything about the Sith, the culture, the dark side and stuff, then you're a Sith, right?
I'd be curious to know if Lucas or the people that kind of crafted the lore behind the Mandalorian culture, behind the Sith ideals, I wonder if they took that concept out of Jewish culture, because you can be not born of Jewish heritage and then be brought in if you accept all of this about the culture and you live the culture. I'd actually be curious to know if they use that as inspiration for it.
Actually, I think maybe because it was created by Karen Travis, and she used to be a war journalist in Israel, I believe.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I did not know that.
You might be spot on, actually.
Yeah. And we know that with George Lucas's brilliance, he took a lot of themes, like even like mythos from Greek and all that. He took a lot of themes from different cultural aspects, like the monks and samurais and what have you.
Oh, yeah.
And turned it and then used those themes to build the Star Wars universe. And so that could be it, because he wanted people to relate to it, easily relate, even though it's not of our reality. It's escapism, right? But be able to relate to it.
Absolutely.
So that's an take. That's very interesting. I think people confuse that when they talk about politics using political themes, like, oh, well, George was just using Vietnam, blah, 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 blah. He was using the time that he grew up with and took examples, used them as themes to create the lore. He wasn't making a documentary through Star Wars.
Yeah, wasn't making a political statement through Star Wars, guys.
Correct. So
it's called allegory, not a one-for-one.
Correct. And then, so what did you think of Revan and Malik's relationship? So we're going to go back to Revan now.
I'm perfectly fine with that. No complaints here.
You want to expand on that? Go ahead.
So Revan and Malik had a very interesting relationship. They were the two most skilled young Jedi of their era within the Order, and they both decided that fighting in the Mandalorian Wars was something that needed to be a thing. They needed to protect outlying planets from getting taken over by this invading force. Like, if ever there was a time where the Jedi Order should have thought to themselves, hey, we consider ourselves protectors of the peace. Oh, there are these people over here going from planet system to planet system and just taking it over. Maybe that falls within our purview. Evidently, that thought didn't occur to them. But to Revan and to Malik, it did. That was a perfect example, I think, of where the rule of two idea came to Revan, because with how Malik kind of the two of them, Revan was the most talented, he was the most powerful, and he was clearly put in the position of power in relation to him. As far as when Vitiate like sent them out to kind of do his bidding. And Malik was that one that craved the power. He craved the status. Mm-hmm. And Revan was the one that possessed it. And Revan probably, when he created his holocron, saw that. Mm-hmm. He understood that. And it's really, really cool to see how they go from... It's a very similar story in a lot of ways to Anakin and Obi-Wan, at least when they're actually young men, not when, Obi-Wan's training little Annie, where you have these two people that kind of start as brothers, and you can see how things can go wrong, how things can corrupt them, and what the end result of that is. And I love the bit where Malik thinks he's good and decides to tries to get one over on Revan, and he pays for it with his jaw. So he kind of gets a temporary last laugh when he blasts his ship, but that wound up not working in his favor, because that wound up actually resulting in Revan coming back to the light. Even if he was really kind of in between, Revan was always kind of in between after all of that. And that's touched on very well in the Revan novel by Carpetian, where he's kind of this perfect balance of the light and the dark, and it's described that he accesses and channels the Force in its most pure form, because he simultaneously is able to harness both the light and the dark with no or minimal effort. How it just flows through him. Kreia describes him as Revan just being power, basically. She describes him as I think Revan was power. It's like staring into the very heart of the Force, and that's pretty spot on to how powerful he was. But yeah, the stuff between Revan and Malik, that when you play the KOTOR game, you see that journey and him finally facing off against Malik and having regained those bits of his memories at that point, and understanding what this final confrontation means. It's a big deal, and it's a perfect period on that story being told.
Right. And so people who have not read Darth Bane trilogy, I suggest you get on it. No, and and you'll see things, like I said, and I've even tweeted this on Twitter, is that everybody has their own perspective and their own experience with Star Wars, and that's what Talking EU is about, is having the one-on-one interview with individuals so that they can share, their experience, their love through Star Wars as well. Mm-hmm. And Soul Assassin says the Jedi were hesitant to jump into another war since the Sith war 30 years before, and believe something else was at play behind the Mandalorians. And then Terminus. So Andrew, do you know of the DLC that was released last December where
Vitiate,
Vitiate, I always say Vitiate for whatever reason, that's just me, but was officially defeated for good?
Yeah, I've kept up on the story of SWTOR with everything related to Revan, because I wanted to see how they finally finish all that out. And I was just immensely disappointed. I didn't necessarily need Revan to have as cool as it would have been for him to, have a happy ending and be with his wife Basila and his children. That didn't necessarily have to be the end, but he needed to be more than just the friggin' Force ghost that leads other Force spirits through, like, Vitiate's mind and whatnot, and then Vitiate finally gets to... Like, it was super ham-fisted to me. I think it was really poor storytelling and not a good period on the story of Revan at all.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you shared with me the list of novels that you are going through, and we know that you're currently in the process of reading Darth Plagueis.
Mhm.
So I know one of the novels that you shared was you read the Kenobi novel. So go ahead and share more about what you liked and what, you can even share scenes within the novel, what have you, that really made an impression on you with the novel Kenobi.
Something I really love about the novel Kenobi, and anybody who's a fan of that era in Star Wars, that kind of that Skywalker era, so anything from prequel up through the end of the OT, that novel does such a great job of expanding on the character of Obi-Wan in his adulthood in a post Order 66 galaxy, and it really is cool to see the balance between him kind of trying to live this hermit lifestyle and having to square that with his ideals as a Jedi, and seeing people that are in need, people that need help, need protection, need a champion, if you will, and him struggling with, like, I need to stay out of the limelight, I need to stay in the shadows. Like, they could find me. The Empire could find me, and there's no question about that. But these people need help, and I am sworn as a Jedi to protect those who need it. And they do such a great job of telling that facet of his character. That's the Obi-Wan we know. He believes in protecting the innocent, and it fits right in with the movies. It fits perfectly within the movies in terms of like what we know of Obi-Wan as a character from the prequels. And it's cool because it also layers in not just his personal convictions as a Jedi Master, not just his own kind of personal responsibilities as far as like, I'm supposed to be watching over baby Luke and making sure no harm comes to him. But it also shows him as a relatable human being, because he makes personal relationships in that novel, in that story, where it's like you can tell he wants this. He wants to be around people. He doesn't want to live as a hermit the rest of his life. But he's a man of conviction, and ultimately, if he's charged, and you said it perfectly, Allura, if he's charged with something, he will follow through on that. Like another perfect example in Revenge of the Sith, when he's talking with Yoda and saying, "Let me face Palpatine. I can't fight him. I can't kill Anakin. Right? I don't want to do it." But Yoda tells him what's up, and he follows through on those orders.
Right. He didn't go against. He didn't, hee-haw. He's like, all right.
And he didn't do it because Yoda said that Obi-Wan isn't powerful enough to face Palpatine, though that was true. He did it because it was an order from somebody above him. Right.
And then you probably can agree with me when it comes to like Kenobi being a Jedi and still remaining a Jedi on Tatooine. He knows that he has to be very ambiguous about it or not show that he's a Jedi. So it was kind of a conflict, because that all his life, that's all he knew what he needed to be, or what he was a Jedi. And now he's going into, hiding that, I guess you could say, identity, his lifestyle from the rest of the world, because he doesn't want to be discovered by the Empire, right? However, we also know that Vader will never set foot on Tatooine. So he had that push and pull of like, I can't stop being a Jedi because I swore as a Jedi to protect people, right? But then he couldn't be a Jedi because then that would, blow his cover. So what do you think about that interesting little conflict that we've seen with?
That's such a great dichotomy and internal conflict that was written in there. You said it perfect. This is all he has known his entire life. When you are brought into the order at the age that you're supposed to be, you are very, very young. And they have their feelers out there. They find the Force sensitive ones and they bring them in immediately. And so this is all he's known his entire life, is being a Jedi, being a protector, being there in the forefront and protecting those who need protection. And he's not able to do that in the capacity that he ordinarily would have, in the capacity that he's known all of his life. And it's that internal conflict is so great to read in that book. It's so well written, because it's subtle enough to where it's not just kind of thrown out there, but it's still visible enough to where you can totally see the internal turmoil and conflict happening inside him. You can see Obi-Wan's face, and you can see the concern for people around him, but also he needs to stay the heck out of the light, for lack of a better term.
Right. And did you know that Kenobi, or Obi-Wan, did venture off of Tatooine on a mission during his exile?
I had heard that. I'll admit, I don't know anything about it beyond having heard that was a thing.
All right, so it happened, and this is one series. It's a young readers novella series, but it's called The Last of the Jedi. And book 1 and 2 of that sets Obi-Wan on a journey off of Tatooine, and it's like a year and a half right after exile. So it's very still young and early in his exile. And the only reason why he goes on this journey, and he also consults with Qui-Gon about this journey, is to make sure that the birth of the twins was not discovered. So everything that happened on Polis Massa was erased. And that's the only reason why he left. Then he returned and remained in exile, really didn't put himself out there, because his mission, who Obi-Wan Kenobi is that he sticks to his mission, right? So his mission was to stay in exile, stay out of the view of the Empire, to make sure Luke grows up and that they train him to defeat the Empire. Wow. And so it makes sense for him to do it very early on in his exile, like within a year or so, to make sure all the grounds were covered, to make sure that the birth of the twins was not discovered by Vader, because he was kind of sensing something. He was kind of saying, okay, what happened on Polis Massa. So there was a little bit of detail with that. I'm not going to spoil that too much, but that was the only reason why Obi-Wan Kenobi left, and it was very early into his exile, and then he remained in exile.
The Last of the Jedi, you said?
The Last of the Jedi, and they're young readers novellas, and I think there's like 10 books, I believe. You can find them 2 in hardcover, so you have the volume 1 through whatever, and the volume 2, or you can find them. I found them cheap. If you're interested in them, I can see if there's any more. And I can send that information to you, but that's a great.
Yeah, please.
Well, yes,
please.
And it goes into it fleshes out Kenobi's exile and taking care of any loose ends before he settles into his exile. And so I'm going to go into this. Seeing that Obi-Wan series is coming out based upon what you read about, read in Kenobi. How do you feel about the series?
Well, right off the bat, it's being handled by current year Lucasfilm, so my hopes are not high. I was immediately concerned when they said that Vader's going to be making an appearance. It will totally screw with everything if those two meet, or even in the same place, whether they actually see each other or not. Because if they're in the same place, they're going to sense each other. Because to my knowledge, neither of them have Krea's ability of force cloaking. So that right there is lore breaking of what we know. If Vader has like a scene that is completely unrelated to what's going on with Obi-Wan, I guess off world somewhere else, I guess that's fine. But it's hard for me to get excited about Disney handling any characters that I like, whether that's Revan, whether that's Kenobi, doesn't matter. Because they have shown themselves incapable of being proper caretakers and stewards of this property and of the characters contained within it. So I mean, it, again, going back to what I said about I will play the KOTOR remake because I want to be able to actually speak to it as to whether or not it's good. I'll do the same thing with Kenobi. Disney won't be getting any of my money for it, but that's all I'll say about that. So I'll watch it and then I'll speak to it. If it's absolute trash, I will trash it until I'm purple in the face. But I'm not excited for it, and that makes me sad to say that I'm not excited about something that's giving me more Kenobi.
And I think that we're witnessing fans who grew up with Star Wars, like myself and you, and I remove myself totally away from that. I do my research and stuff to do compare and contrast videos and stuff, and keep an eye out what's coming out next to share with. Okay, this doesn't go well with the OT, or the PT, or the 6 movies that was created by George Lucas. However, with the new series coming out and all this stuff, I'm done. I'm done with it. I will maybe watch reviews like from you and elsewhere or whatever. But this rematch of the century that everybody's talking about, even Chow confirmed it, that they're going to meet, do another duel between the two. Well, when you look at George,
that shatters the lore.
Right. And George, when he created the Battle of Heroes on Mustafar, right? He based everything that happened there with the lines that were spoken to in A New Hope, from Vader to Obi-Wan, or just even in Vader in general, about Obi-Wan and his intentions. And this was documented, but now, like, if you could used to be able to find it on Wikipedia, and now it's not there anymore. I won't go further into that.
That's because Wikipedia is filled with shills.
Right. And so when you get into that interview and George's intention, he basically says that, like what I said, their battle was a first, that their first duel, and then A New Hope was their last. There was no in between.
Yeah.
And even though it was vague on what they said in A New Hope, like Vader and stuff, he's referring to their last time they met, and that was basically their when he turned to Vader.
Well, in A New Hope, Vader even says, when we last fought, I was but a learner. Now I'm the master. Like, okay, well, that would be the only time when they fought where you were still master and apprentice.
Right. Even though he's a Jedi Knight, he still never was a master, because the master, well, unless you get to Grandmaster's not very guaranteed, and it's 1 in a million, right?
Yeah.
So basically, he still has a lot to learn to become master. So he's still, even though he's not official apprentice under Kenobi, he still is learning under Kenobi, because Kenobi's his master, right?
Well, Knights are still learning.
Right.
Yeah, and he's also very much a Sith apprentice when he fights Kenobi as well. So there's that as well.
Yeah, he's kind of a dual apprentice in a way.
But the best argument against what Disney's doing, though, is that George Lucas actually said they never fought or met after Revenge of the Sith and up to A New Hope. He says it on the bonus material on the DVDs.
Right.
Yeah.
So that alone that's checkmate. The creators said they never met. So this Kenobi show, it's going to be exactly what they're doing with everything else. They're going to put everyone's favorite toy on the screen and have them fight.
Yeah.
It's like 2 kids with Asperger's smashing their action figures together. That's what it's going to be. And
there goes my channel for that now.
Yeah, but it's the same with everything else. It's Kenobi in name only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, it's Star Wars in name only, so why wouldn't it be that too?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then Vertical Horizon says if Vader had any inkling of Kenobi being alive, he would have ransacked the galaxy to no end looking for him. So the rematch is BS if it's physical.
Side note, if Vader knows Kenobi's alive, he would have said something.
Yeah.
Hunt him down, blah, blah, blah. Tarkin seems to think Kenobi's dead from old age in episode 4.
Right.
He says, surely he's dead by now. Yeah.
And that's
so
line right there.
The light side of the Force can sustain you for many years.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of the dark side.
So if they've been searching for him, he would have said something, finally he's found, or something.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, we finally found him. Now, you know, we can end this kind of deal, right? I mean, I'm not saying it in eloquently or anything, but basically that would be the gist of it, right? And so, you know, I tell people, enjoy what you enjoy with Star Wars, you know, what have you. You know, there's some people that are on the fence, you know, going into between and what have you or whatever. But when it comes down to lore and continuity, that that's the reason why I got into Star Wars, is because of the history, because they built 25,000 plus years of history in this fantasy space opera, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very unique. Star Wars as a franchise was very unique with that. You know, we see it kind of we see it in Tolkien, right, but not in a sci-fi fantasy. And
Right.
so George even got, and his company even broke world records for, you know, like countless novels that were tied to a movie saga. And that tells you something, because if it wasn't all in one continuity and all that, then they wouldn't have gotten that award.
Well, it tells you how hungry for content within this universe people are.
Right. So let's go ahead and move away from the Kenobi novel and series coming up. So let's go back to the Revan novel. So
you got another quiz question for me?
Yeah, it's coming up here soon. So you're like, oh, you're just bracing.
All right, I'm itching. I'm itching to not embarrass myself.
You've been pretty good. So this is a great conversation. So the novel versus the game. So when you got to play the game and then read the novel, so, you know, go ahead and compare and contrast between the game, the novel, and the pros and the cons of Revan.
So the Revan, obviously, the character of Revan within the KOTOR game, the first game, is a character that is crafted by the player. This is, you get to make the decisions that are going to affect those around you, affect the events of the game. But as I said before, there is the canon version of the game. These are the actual events that we would consider recorded history. And the Revan novel picks up where the game left off very well. There's just a small bit of time that happens in between. It's explained succinctly. It doesn't feel like it was glossed over. It's just like, this is what happened. Revan and Bastila, you know, after, you know, assuming that Revan and Bastila in the canon version of the game, they fell in love. That's the canon romance, because they had that force bond with each other. You know, they say, we're going to get married. And the Order's like, all right, well, y'all, fine. You saved the galaxy. We don't need you being a problem again. So we're going to send you off. You just go over there and be quiet and fine, get married. Right.
Yes.
And it follows along what we already knew about the Jedi Order. It follows along what we already know about Revan as a character. And then it picks up from there. And Revan, who had, throughout the course of the events of the first game, he had regained many of his memories of the time that he spent waging war on the galaxy. But he hadn't regained all of his memories from prior to that. So from what had happened in between when he was waging the war on the Republic and on the Jedi, back to when he and Malak met Vitiate. And so the novel picks up with him having these nightmares, these recurring nightmares, and they're of his time on Droman Kos and being in the presence of the Sith Emperor Vitiate, also known as Darth Tenebrous, or Darth Tenebrae. Tenebrous is the word that they actually derived that from. And it does this really good job of keeping in line with what we know of Revan in terms of he wants to do the right thing. But it balances really well, and it tells the internal story of him balancing the light and the dark, because it's something that was kind of unique to him, and him being able to, like I said before, simultaneously tap into both sides of the Force in kind of this really weird, perfect yin and yang harmony. And that's one of the reasons why Bane and other Sith considered him the most powerful Sith, or like a true Sith or a true master of the Force, because he was able to harness it in its pure form, both simultaneously. And all the way through the book, they do a great job of telling that internal balance. and showing what he's willing to sacrifice, what he's willing to do to ensure the future of his family first and foremost. Because he tells Bastila, when Bastila says, I'm going to go with you, because he tells her there's something dark coming. I sense it. Whatever it is, I need to find it. I need to put a stop to it. And Bastila, obviously, this her being her husband, the love of her life, her soulmate, the one that she has this force bond with, she immediately says, I'm going with you. We're doing this together. And he says, I'm doing this for you.
Right.
And for our future. And so even though so he's doing it to protect her and protect his family. So he doesn't want her being put in harm's way in the midst of that. And it's sad because they never reunite, and that's heartbreaking that they only had these handful of years together. And it's just happenstance that the night before he leaves is when Vader, their son, is conceived, because otherwise that would have been the end of it, and that would have been the end of the Sean line. But the great thing is that wasn't the end of the Sean line, because there were other great Jedi that came from it. Satele, who is like 7 or 8 generations removed from Revan and Bastila, she becomes the youngest Grand Master of the Order ever.
Right.
And she's this powerful character, and that's a character that I think gets a lot of heavy focus in the MMO. But the novel does tell a fantastic story, and it brings in characters that you remember from the game. Like, it has this whole great section with Canderous Ordo, and the discussions the two of them have are phenomenal, and the battles that they go through are phenomenal. I'm blanking on the name of the planet, but they go to a planet which has got Ordo's clan. His wife's the head of the clan at this time, and
Onderon?
That might be it.
Or Duxon? No, Duxon's the moon.
Yeah, I cannot remember it for the life of me, but
I think it's Onderon.
Yeah, I think you're right. But they're looking for the Mask of Mandalore there, and Revan is like helping the Mandalorians, Canderous' clan, fight off these guys, but he's doing it like subtly, and he's trying to not do it as powerful as he is. But eventually it gets revealed, and what I find funny, and this touches on something I said earlier, when he like went around using the name Arvin, which is just really switching around the letters in his name, where Canderous' wife says, "You really think we were going to be fooled by you switching around the letters in your name?" And it's like, when I read that bit, I was like, yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. The only thing I don't like about that novel is how it ends. It just makes me so sad that
it's a tragic ending. It is.
He's a tragic character. He gets captured for 3 years, and Mitra, that was a great part. It was so cool that they brought in the exile. They brought in Mitra Surik to help rescue him. I thought that was fantastic. I was like, look at them tying KOTOR 1 and 2 together by having these two characters reunite. And that was so cool. And there's this great interaction between the two characters.
You want to know something, though?
What's up?
Stuff like that, the tying in with the games and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And even the comics, actually, because you haven't read them yet, but the 50 the Knights of the Old Republic comics, I think it's 50. They take place before the game, and they set up a lot of characters for the game, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the background of Malak in it, and a lot of stuff. But stuff like this, back in the day, we didn't think much of it because it was common.
Right. This was the practice. This was the standard. This is what was done.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's a tragic end to the character, though. For him to then get captured and tortured for 300 years, and then he doesn't get to see his family. That sucks. No wonder he was pissed when he woke up.
Right.
Look at the Darth Bane trilogy. It ties into the prequels with the Rule of Two. It ties into the Old Republic stuff, and it also ties into the Tales of the Jedi, which also fun stuff. The Knights of the Old Republic, the first one, also ties a little bit into A New Jedi Order.
Right.
which because Candace tells a story about a Yuzon Wong ship.
Yep.
Okay.
So
there's a lot. There's a lot of
KOTOR
like,
is almost like a hub. The first game, it's almost like a hub for all kinds of time periods.
right. You have all these threads connecting here and there, like history, right?
Yeah.
And that's what made Star Wars very unique. And we were discussing this on Twitter today. The EU and the hardcore fans is what kept Star Wars alive between the movies and after the movies. Because the fans
even Disney has said that.
And now we're getting more and less. They want to favor, the casual fans, which is fine. But and a broader range of fans, which is fine. I get that they want more fans, right? But because of that, they are putting in, real life politics, and all that stuff that really doesn't fit because they want to attract these people who want themselves in the character rather than relating to the character. There's a huge difference with that.
Yeah, it's I did a post on Twitter yesterday where I basically said it wasn't KK who destroyed Star Wars. It was the casual fans indirectly, because Disney and other corporations that has big IPs, they have all decided to try and cater to the casual audience by making it all kinds of inclusive and stuff. By itself, that's not so bad, but
no, it's when you decide to throw out the other stuff in favor of it.
Right.
Yeah, that plus you're trying to cover a bigger audience that's not really that interested either, right? So you're basically you have a set amount of cloth, and you're stretching it to cover way more than it can cover, which means it's going to tear, and you're going to get holes in it. Right? That's what's happened with Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. It's going to happen with Tolkien now. And it's happened with DC and Marvel. It's the same thing. And it's not Kathleen Kennedy. She's just a symptom, right? It's the big corporations that are trying to make these IPs way bigger than they can sustain, right?
Well, and it's showing that. It's like what Bilbo said: butter spread over too little butter spread over too much bread, and they're trying to appeal to people that have no interest, and by doing that, they are alienating the people who do have interest, and therefore they're actually losing money because of it. So they're trying to appeal to a larger audience, but in doing so, their audience is shrinking. The audience that's actually willing to pay money for this stuff, because the people that they're trying to appease, the people they're trying to appeal to and market towards, these people don't buy stuff. Maybe they'll go see the movie once, but they're not the person that's going to go see Revenge of the Sith 3 times in the same week. They're not the kind of person that's going to go buy all the Force FX lightsabers, or go get them custom made or whatnot, buy the comics, buy the novels, buy the action figures and all of this. If anything, you might get some people that's like, oh, I'm going to cosplay as that character. Cool. You're not getting that person's money by them cosplaying that character. They're making that shit on their own. So you are gaining nothing and losing a lot.
Yeah. And with them catering to the casuals, they don't have to take care with the lore, because the casuals don't know it anyway. Yeah, which is why they can pump up stuff way quicker.
Well, that's how you get your overnight experts, your Google normies, your people that read the first paragraph or two. Yeah, you get your people that'll read the first paragraph of a Wikipedia entry, or maybe not even Wikipedia. Maybe they'll just go to straight Wikipedia and read the first paragraph there, and then consider themselves learned. And then those people just get stomped on and then call you stuff because you stomped on them.
Yeah, I mean, if you read, let's say you read the wiki page of the first Bane book, you get
it glosses over stuff.
Or
ignores entirely.
It has a page, a page of a very, very simplified summary, extremely basic, which means you're missing out on 349 other pages.
Right.
Oh yeah, the how and why of it.
Exactly. You don't get the context. That's the difference between people that, okay, maybe you know a few events that happened to this character, but you don't know the why and you don't know the tone.
Yeah, basically you got to see the cutscenes on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on here. So a little bit. So what did you think about Canderous and the Mandalorians, how they were revealed, how they were shown in the Revan novel?
I think it was fantastic. They definitely came off as having their own culture, their own set of rules, and that's how it should be, because that's not something that we've gotten really at all from Disney. That's for sure. We get, this is the way. Okay, that's catchy, sure. And you've got cool looking armor, and you've got a couple of other cool looking armored Mandalorians. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the forger, the armorer, she looked pretty badass. I wanted more of her, but you don't get anything lore-wise out of Disney. You don't get any meat out of Disney, and that's because their writers are incapable of it. So the Revan novel, even though that was only a handful of chapters within that book that dealt with Canderous and his clan and the interactions there, and kind of the tragic interactions there, really, because he wound up having to kill his own wife. Spoiler alert, should have read a book.
Right. It's tragic. The whole book is tragic in its own too, like especially when you get closer to the end of the story and stuff.
Yeah.
But it keeps you interested because you're like, oh crap, he's got to kill his wife, kind of deal. And so, there's in Star Wars, like classical Star Wars, the authors and even the company, the IP wasn't afraid about killing off characters. And, spoiler alert, we do get, Chewie killed. We do get a couple of Anakin Skywalker's grandchildren killed, one very tragically, the other one, I guess you could say it's tragic as well, because but we do get that. And then when you finally get to read through the New Jedi Order, once you get there, that right there, I mean, the Old Republic, it's dark in its own light, in its own aspect. But when you get into, the later years, when Luke's in charge and Luke creates the New Jedi Order, people expect more light than anything else. And then we get a
no, he had to deal with Exar Kun.
Right. Yeah, and there's
nothing light about that.
Right. We get the a new threat, right? And so no one's safe from death. No one is safe. And here now we in the new lore, it's like it feels very placid.
Yeah.
Very, very
it's hollow. It's so hollow. Even if you were to pull up on Wikipedia, if you wanted to give your computer AIDS or cancer, you could go to Wikipedia and you could pull up Darth Bane, and there are two different sections for him. There's the canon, quote unquote, section. There's legends section. The difference in length for the article is night and day. It's like measuring a kiddie pool and a lake. And it just shows how much of a give a damn Disney lacks. Like they take little snippets of what people who read the Bane novels know of the character, and that's all they give you. Whereas the actual Legends Bane has so much meat to the character. There's so much in those stories that give you the why and the how of Bane's actions, of his motivations, and that's something that doesn't matter to Disney. It doesn't matter to the canon.
Do you know why it's night and day? It's because the new writers, including Filoni, didn't read it. They just read the Wikipedia article. That's it. And you can tell.
Yeah, and then Disney Lucasfilm was probably like, yeah, this is the stuff we're keeping right here. That's fine. That's all we need.
I remember maybe about 4 months ago, I read one of the EU novelists for the new lore for Disney Lucasfilm, basically just researched off of Wikipedia. And Wikipedia was so proud about that. The administrators for that were so proud of that they shared it on Twitter. And I'm like, are you serious? That's their resources, when they can go in and see all the countless data that they said that was not a source material that they didn't have. It's right there. Leland Chi kept it all pre-buyout. and stuff like that. They couldn't go in there and research within the company. They researched off of Wikipedia.
That's ridiculous. How sad is that?
They basically Googled it.
Right. Instead of just going into company and working with the associates there to create a story, they went off of Wikipedia.
It's like writing a dissertation using Wikipedia as your source. Like that was frowned upon when I was in school. That wasn't a valid source.
I just finished, like I said, I finished getting my AA in arts. And even like every professor that I went through, they're like, we do not accept any wiki, resources. You cannot use that. And so that's very laughable. So,
the sad thing is that writer was probably told by the story group to just look up the Wikipedia article. Because it's the story group's job to give them all the information, and they clearly didn't.
Right. All right. So let's go into our last topic so we can start winding down here. Well, I did have a quiz for you, but you kind of answered that. The quiz was, who was Revan's name or son named after? And you already revealed.
Oh, yeah. It's named after him.
Yeah.
Just switched around his letters again.
Exactly. And that was kind of brilliant there as well. So, with that, we already expanded a lot about the Bane trilogy. So what I want to get into is the Rule of Two. So a little bit more. So what are your thoughts with the Rule of Two, reading the Bane trilogy and now reading and getting into the Darth Plagueis novel?
The Rule of Two, having read the first Bane novel and seeing where the Sith Order was at that point in history and how kind of weakened, and even though they were waging war against the Jedi, you see the holes. You see how they are demonstrably weaker than they were in ages past when it was only a handful of Sith. And the Rule of Two was a perfect consolidation, because if you think of Force sensitives, trained Force sensitives that can actually deliberately and intentionally tap into the power of the Force, whether it's the light side or the dark side. If you think of them as conduits and you think of the Force as just energy, if it has to distribute all of its energy through only two conduits, those conduits are going to be night and day, demonstrably more powerful and have access to so much more power, provided they have the capacity for it, than say if you're going to funnel all of that energy through hundreds, if not thousands, of Force sensitives. It makes perfect sense. Sure, there are going to be other people that they're attuned to the Force, that they have the capacity or they have the talent for it. But if they don't have the training, then they can't necessarily access it with deliberation, with intention. And therefore, just by way of that, they're not going to be as powerful as those who have the training. And so the Rule of Two was that perfect consolidation of, okay, if we're going to end the Jedi, if we're going to finally defeat the Jedi, the only way we're going to do it is if we're powerful enough. And right now we're spread too thin, way too thin. I said it before, Revan looked at the Brotherhood after getting that real knowledge and real understanding of past Sith Lords, true Sith, as he called them, like Revan. Right. He looked at the Brotherhood and said, these are jokes, these are pretenders, these are clowns. This is laughable. And even the most powerful among them he paled in comparison to what a true Sith would have been capable of. And so I think the Rule of Two was a perfect setup for future characters like Plagueis, like Palpatine. And I like that it went from, because in the Old Republic, there were a lot of wars. There were a lot of wars in those thousands of years of history. Like, just an immense, there's the Jedi Civil War. There's, all the different wars between the Sith and the Jedi. There's just an immense number of them. And so to taper that down to instead the Sith working from the shadows is far more compelling than just throwing in another war. Just from a storytelling perspective. Okay, whoop-de-doo, it's another war. no, this is way more interesting, because then you get to focus on one or two characters, one to have the power, one to crave the power.
Right.
And you get to learn so much more about them, because there's justification for putting that focus there, because these are the only ones. We get to learn so much about Bane and about Zana because they were the only Sith at the time. And so that not only allows us to learn more about them, but it allows us to learn about other Sith Lords in ages past, because then they're seeking the knowledge of those former Sith Lords. You know, whether we're talking about Frida Nad, if we're talking about Ondedu, or whoever else, there's just so much opportunity for knowledge to be gained if you focus only on a couple of characters. And I love the rule of two. I think it was perfect. And I think it didn't last very long, actually, though, not in its pure form. Its pure form was really Bane and Zana. And somebody earlier in the chat had said after Zana overthrew Bane, that's when the rule of two really started. That's also really when it started to end and degrade, because Xana's apprentice, Cognis, from what I understand, she didn't quite follow or buy into the rule of two. And so therefore her apprentice after her didn't either. And so it just kind of degraded from there. And that's why looking at the relationship between Plagueis and his master, or Palpatine and Plagueis, is so different from the interaction and relationship between Bane and Zana. Bane and Zana were the one true representation of the rule of two. And I think that if Bane's intention of how the rule of two was to be carried out had actually succeeded, like Cognis followed in Xana's footsteps and so forth, then I think that the Sith ultimately would have won out, period.
Right. And I'm excited for you to get into the Revenge of the Sith novel. To me, that's the best Star Wars movie novelization.
Oh, I've read that.
Okay.
I've read that.
So
I read that actually in high school, the same year that Revenge of the Sith came out.
Awesome. And so you know that Yoda, had his big reflection, and that's towards or within the New Jedi Order chapter, the very last chapter, where he realized that he wasn't successful in training, Jedi for like 800 years, because he trained the Jedi to defeat the Sith of the past rather than allowing them to evolve and grow into the future so that they can be prepared to, for possible threats of the Sith in the future. And then so that was very vital to the story, because he realized that he's seen himself in a way of being a failure to that, because he didn't allow the Jedi to progress, right? That he didn't allow them to expand and grow, and he just kept them stagnant.
Yeah. Well, that's because it was either you or Stieg that mentioned it earlier. It's because it was a time of peace. They had so many centuries of peace that why would they need to be prepared for another Bane or another Revan? Right. They had no need. They had no reason. That's why Palpatine and, Plagueis before him were able to exist in the shadows right under their noses. And that's why they were blinded to it, because they had no reason to believe that they had to be on high alert.
Right. And then so I just love what he goes into when he finally just starts thinking about Luke Skywalker and even Leia. And he's like, Luke will be, Luke will bring a new order. And so it ties it beautifully with all of that. And so it's very significant, and now seeing what they want to do with the retcon of the movies with this dyad and the Sith and stuff like that, it kind of takes away all of that, all of like even what Yoda has accomplished, and also what he sees where he needed to grow and he failed to grow himself as a leader of the order. There's a lot of threads that it pulls on and phrase within the lore, and many people don't realize how bad that retcon is. They just want this all like, oh, dyad's just another thing of force bond. It's not. The force bond does not automatically make your bond to another person make them as powerful as you and bring balance to the force, so I think they fail to realize what that means, and what that means even for the Sith in the progression towards the rule of two and beyond.
Yeah, that's just another symptom of all the current problems within Star Wars, because something that they've been just, it seems, intent on over the last handful of years is making the Jedi out to be kind of the bad guys and like this dogmatic order that could never see beyond themselves. And sure, there are instances of that, like if you look in the case of how they. Yeah, if you look in how they treated Revan and Bastila after all that they did, and how they treated even Bastila's descendants, because her descendants, both Satele and her mother, went through kind of the same thing. They were put into exile because of their views. And I don't know why, but they want the characters that are supposed to be the good guys look like the bad guys for that. And you can have characters with flaws. There was, I think it was in one of the High Republic novels, where they make Yoda out to be kind of a jackass. And it's like, Yoda was a flawed character, and people who loved the character knew that. You don't need to make him look like this dogmatic character that can't see beyond himself and can't see beyond his own shortcomings. So I don't understand that mentality and why they're doing that, other than they just want to lift up the characters that they want to lift up that have zero likability and zero meat to them. That's really what it is.
Yeah. So we're going to start winding down. And thank you, Raging Rhino, for coming in. And he says, Sith were able to evolve, but the Jedi stay stagnant. Yeah, because, like we said, Yoda was just training them how he was taught. There was no real evident threat. And so they were caught off guard. And I think that was the brilliance of it, because the Jedi order, no peace order, nothing, no organization is perfect, right? And we learned that just because the old order was not perfect doesn't mean that they were flawed or they were bad or they were the villains, like villains in disguise, because they weren't. They were taken by this. They were basically the what do you call it? Now I'm brain farting here. They were the victims of Palpatine too, as well as the galaxy. Every single person, the clones were the victims. So was the Order, and so was everybody in the galaxy. So was the Senate, right?
Yeah.
Because he had this brilliant plan of orchestrating, two sides against each other. And he was the orchestrator of the Confederates, and he was the orchestrator of the clones, right? Of both sides. And no one realized that until it was too late.
Basically, what you're saying is that flawed shouldn't equal retarded.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right. All right. So let's start closing down here. One more here. So Andrew, with the current state of Star Wars today, what are your thoughts, and what are your hopes, and what do you want to see? All of that. I mean, it's not related to EU. I know that you're getting into the EU more and more because you want to.
I want to enjoy good Star Wars.
Right, you're attached to the heart of the true meaning of Star Wars that was created and overseen by George Lucas. So go ahead and just leave us with the ending note on that before we conclude here.
What I would like would be for Star Wars to be reborn as Star Wars once again. And for that to happen, it's going to have to die first completely. There has to be a complete changing of the guard, and that's not happening anytime soon. That's what I would like to see more than anything. As it stands, it's pretty impossible to be legitimately excited for any upcoming Star Wars projects, whether it's animation, whether it's live action. And that includes things that are focused on some of my favorite characters in the entire galaxy far, far away. Like we talked about earlier, the Kenobi show. I'm not excited for that. Why would I be excited about watching something that's going to shit all over a character that I love? Why would I be legitimately excited for the remake of KOTOR as much as I want to see it in all its current gen 4K glory? Why would I be excited about something that's probably going to butcher the story of characters that I love? Revan, Bastila, Canderous. They'll probably find a way to screw up Canderous. Who knows?
He's a straight white male. Can't have that.
Well, yeah. Well, so is Revan in canon, but I'm sure they'll retcon that as well. If I'm being honest, the only thing that I'm legitimately looking forward to Star Wars wise is the sequel to Jedi Fallen Order, and that's because aside from reading the EU novels, that game is the only time I've been legitimately excited for Star Wars since The Force Unleashed, which was a long time ago. A really long time ago. So I think Star Wars needs to go away for a while. In terms of new Star Wars, I think that people who still love Star Wars or want to love Star Wars or trying to get into Star Wars should do what you guys have been recommending, which is getting into the EU novels. Find a character that you can latch on to. Maybe you played one of the games. Find a novel that is based off of that character. There probably is one. And read it or listen to it on audiobook. You know, there's so much to dive into, the sheer amount of content that there is. I could go through a new novel every week for the next 3 years and not get through all of them. So there's a lot of content. There's no shortage of Star Wars content.
Oh, and you also have over 1,000 comics.
And that. Which Steve, you'll have to link me the Old Republic ones that you were talking about, because I definitely want to get into those.
Oh, they actually did a big hardcover with all of them. It was released this summer.
All right, I'll have to look at that.
It's about $100 though. It's probably worth it.
It's a hardcover. No, the comics in hardcover, so it might be worth it. You never know, because you know
it's 1,300 something pages, so not necessarily that expensive. Given what you get.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's going to be a great investment too, as well. Especially if you love that era, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's apps. You're actually going to get exactly what you want, I think. If you like. Well, Revan isn't the main character, though. In my opinion, the main character in the comics is better. Because he's a Jedi who has minimal Force skills.
Well, without going into a huge, long tirade, I think that it's easier to relate to characters that are like that. That's one of the reasons why I love Jedi Fallen Order so much and the character of Cal Kestis, because there's a lot to be said for throwing a completely unremarkable, average character into crazy circumstances. And how does this person get through it when they're not this all-powerful character or a chosen one that just has innate talent, where this is just somebody who has to struggle tooth and nail through everything because they're not a remarkable this is a normal average Jedi Knight. You're nothing special, but you have to find a way to make it out alive through these circumstances that are so far above your pay grade. And I find that compelling.
Right. And another character, so if you want to get into the George Lucas era of Star Wars with similar characters, Corran Horn is one of them, that he doesn't have the same telekinesis abilities as a lot of Jedi do. And he does get made, they do make fun of him because of that. Like, he couldn't really lift rocks, when during his training and stuff. And however, he still became a master because he had other skills or other things that, made him distinctive. But he is one of those that are not very talented as many others. And
yeah, I like stuff like that.
So Corran Horn is another one as well. So go ahead, Caffeinated Wolfe, tell us where we can find you and what you have coming up this following week.
You can find me on Twitch primarily, twitch.tv/Caffeinated Wolfe. I do a lot of game streams there, community streams, and solo streams. Tonight, actually, here in less than an hour, I'm running a Mario Kart stream. It's not a community Mario Kart. This is what we call Elite Cup. This is the best racers in our community. It's already a preset set of people, so nobody else is getting to join in, but you can watch us, high-level racers going at it on stream. I'll be streaming it from my channel. A couple of the other guys will be streaming it from theirs as well. And that's going to be a ton of fun and frustration. But you can also find me over on Mary Mayhem's YouTube and Twitch pretty regularly, whether it's Wednesday Night Mayhem, Shenanigans, her Patreon streams and all of that. So you can catch me over there. And then lastly, you can find me over on Twitter. That's Caffeine Wolf. There's an E at the end of that. And I retweet puppy videos. I do some political stuff. I do some Star Wars stuff. I do a lot of comic stuff over there, which is where I like to dunk on Screen Rant, CBR, and Inverse writers because they make it so darn easy. You should join me. #Dogpile.
Right. All right. And so, Stig, are you going to be on any channels this coming week?
Probably yours.
Yeah. Besides mine.
Yeah. Well, I'm co-piloting on Mara's channel, Jade Shadow, on Fridays for the Cringe Factor, which is kind of fun. That's it. I don't do much YouTube anymore, really. Just show up if someone asks me to be on and I'm awake, then yeah, maybe. But yeah, only 2 regular things.
That's a good bar to have.
Which means I get to read more books and stuff. So
right. Awesome. And this has been a phenomenal discussion, interview. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming and allowing me to interview you. I haven't really had anyone who fully talked about the Old Republic and stuff. Usually it's post Return of the Jedi or PT or whatever. So this has been a well awaited conversation, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Yeah, and as for me, this Thursday, coffee chat, this last Thursday, I wasn't feeling too well. And so I was like, and I didn't sleep very well because of it. So I'm like, no coffee chat today. I'd rather be able to respond and be more coherent and not as tired. So I decided not to have coffee chat. However, coffee chat will be back this Thursday, as well as I'll do some more EU lore shorts on my channel. I have something I'll be putting out here pretty soon, and those are fun. I like those shorts that we can do on YouTube. So they make them fun, and they're easy to consume for people who don't have enough time, and you get a bit of EU lore as well. And then Fandom Menace once a week as well. I haven't checked out to see what channel we're going to be on and what day, either Wednesday or Tuesday.
I think it's Mandy's this week.
Is it Mandy's?
I think.
All right. So I will post that on Twitter, and you can find me on Twitter. And that's where I post a lot of where I'm going to be at when it comes to being on my own channel or other people's channels as well. So stay tuned for that as well. And for channel members and those who future channel members, starting November through January, if you come and support the channel during live streams, you will have a chance to win my latest painting, and that's Son of Kifu. And I'm going to show it to you right now. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. And here it is. So this last time I did a member channel special gift, I guess you can say promotional thing for your support. It was Mistress of Rat Attack. This time it's going to be Quinlan Voss, the son of Kifu, right here. And I'm not done with him just yet, but this is just an example of what it's going to turn out to be right there. So
that's great.
Yes. And I will be doing a series of Star Wars paintings with the characters with their planets in that. So stay tuned for that. So those channel members can have opportunities to win a copy. And Miss Martin Muses is the one that won that. It's almost poster size, and so I haven't heard if she received it yet or not, but it was shipped to her. She should have had it by now. I will check the tracking. I should have sent her the tracking as well. But thank you so much for you guys' support. Thank you so much again, Andrew, for being here, and Stig for co-piloting as well. All of you guys, thank you again for coming in, subscribers for supporting the chat as well, and may the force be with you.